Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a presentation by Ray Grove, Product Manager at Convey Compliance. I'm Christina Vekich with Convey Compliance, and I'll be moderating today's event. Today's participants will be on mute for the duration of the event, so if at any time during the presentation you would like to submit a question, please type it in the Q&A box or the chat box in the right side panel of your WebEx screen. We will review all questions and respond to as many as possible during the Q&A session held at the end of the webinar. I wanted to remind you to register for Convey's annual Tax and Regulatory Conference. The 2012 C2 Summit will be held at the Omni Dallas Park West Hotel in Dallas, Texas on Sunday, September 23rd through Tuesday, September 25th, 2012. Convey's C2 Summit is a live tax information reporting seminar that includes a half day of Convey solution training and 2 full days of regulatory and compliance sessions. Right now, we have a BOGO promotion going on where if you register to attend, you will get a discount code for one of your colleagues to register for free, and that goes on until Friday, September 21st. You can register by going to c2summit.convey.com. Now with that, I'd like to hand it over to Ray Grove to walk through the tax identity management process and how to avoid IRS penalties.
Thank you, Christina, and welcome everyone. So, let's go through a brief agenda here so you guys have an idea of what we're going to be covering in today's webinar. So, to begin, we're going to go over a information reporting state of the state. So, we're going to cover more or less where the industry is sitting, why we're talking about this topic, and quite possibly why you as a professional who may or may not be responsible for these responsibilities is probably paying more attention than you have maybe in the past to 1099 reporting. And then we're going to move into tax identity management. And this is really the part where we're going to cover the things that you should be doing proactively as it relates to your data and your 1099 process that is going to help you abate those B notice penalties that many of you are probably receiving right now, in fact. And then from there, we're going to move into Taxport AP, which is one of Convey's flagship products that has a lot of tools that can help you, and we're going to walk through some of what those are and how those services can help you ultimately avoid those penalties. So the state of the state. I don't know if you guys are familiar with who the individual in this picture is, but this is Doug Schulman, the current IRS commissioner. For many of you, you probably are not really even aware that Doug Schulman actually has proposed an entirely new vision for the way the IRS will work with businesses and just overall citizens in general. A big part of this is really due to Congress coming to him and saying, you know, we need to find a way to get more money. We need to get more revenues than what we're getting right now. And since raising taxes is obviously unpopular, he's proposed addressing something called the tax gap. Now the tax gap is the difference between the revenues that the IRS is supposed to collect and what they actually collect. And right now, the tax gap as of 2006 is $450 billion every year. So obviously this is something that they're paying a lot of attention to. And the majority of that tax gap comes from under or misreporting of income, which is really why the IRS and Congress is focusing on 1099 reporting. Because face it, they're broke. Whether it be the federal government or state governments, we're really running out of ways to collect revenue, and doing that without increasing taxes is a very difficult task. You've seen, with this focus on information reporting, there's been a large increase in penalties. They're allowing organizations to abate those penalties a lot less. And in fact, states are now strengthening their state reporting requirements and really following the federal government's lead on getting tougher around 1099 reporting. So, some of those penalties. Now, as a reminder, penalties can be for incorrect name TIN information or late and or missing filings. So based on the time of filing, you'll see that the penalties have increased from the previous state. But also, if you look to the right, there's more regulations coming into play. You have New York auto body reporting. You have 3921, 3922, 6041, 6050W, which brought us Form 1099K. And most recently, we've heard a lot of things around FATCA. All of these big pieces of legislation have ultimately been driving a lot of change in the industry, and a lot more additional requirements and a lot more additional penalties. So when you look at the landscape of compliance and where you need to be and what you need to be doing, for many of you it probably feels like a moving target, something that's really hard to get your hands a hold. Well, I can tell you it's really not going to get that much better. In fact, currently in the Financial Subcommittee, there are pieces of legislation, one called the Tax Gap Act, which is looking to address this issue we brought up earlier. And there's more pieces of legislation coming out each and every day, more proposed legislation to address this issue. So although the problem went away temporarily with the repeal of corporate reporting, it's likely to come back. And why does this matter? Well, money doesn't grow on trees. And for all of you, you're managing organizations where you have your own issues from a business standpoint of managing cash flows and revenues. And you have this increased regulation that's pinching your ability to do your value add and revenue generating activities. So for organizations like yourselves, you're trying to follow this moving target because ultimately your time is worth money, but even outside of that, these penalties cost your organization money. So that's where we're going to discuss identity management. And really the reason why we're focusing on identity management to begin with here is for a lot of organizations, the B notice process is where you really start to spend a lot of time and where the penalties oftentimes are the worst. That's also where you get into situations where you have to do backup withholding. And if you're looking for more resources around B notice specific information, we do have webinars that we've done on that subject that are available on convey.com. So identity management. This is really all about knowing your customer. The problem is with knowing your customers, we all have different customers or vendors or providers, and we all manage different identities. If you're a bank, if you're an investment firm, you're dealing with actual clients. Maybe you're a provider, you're dealing with health insurance, you're dealing with doctors. Depending on who your organization is and the people that you do business with and your requirements for reporting, managing these identities can be a lot easier or a lot more difficult. And getting that information from the payees can either be an easy task or a difficult one. And you have to remember that the 1099 reporting process is really nothing more than a tattletale system for the IRS on the accounting, where people are making money. And the reason why they're focusing on this component of the 1099 process is they're sending you a B notice and they want you to adjudicate that. For the very simple reason is that 1099 you sent them with that inaccurate name TIN information is really completely useless to the IRS. So their focus on this area is intentional from the standpoint of they can receive forms all day long, and if they don't have accurate name TIN information, the IRS sees it as completely useless. So if we take a step back and look at the process that most of us follow, you file your 1099s, you receive your B notices, you send out your W-9s, you receive your P notice, 972CG, you write your abatement letter, and this is a cycle that continues year after year, time after time. However, like we said, things are changing. Part of the problem with that process is it's actually really quite reactive, especially when you get into the B and P notice processing. The only reason why you're sending out your W-9 solicitations oftentimes is because you received a B notice. And then you're having to do the response gathering, you're having to do validation, you're having to do backup withholding. This is all post the IRS telling you you've already done something wrong and you're already in the penalty process. So you're thinking, managing these identities sounds hard. Can I skip it? Well, it's really up to you. I would say sadly no. Because like we stated earlier, there's penalties, there's fines, and moreover, willful neglect is fines plus up to a year in jail. Now, willful neglect can just be you know that there's a better process and that you're not following it, or you know that you're not following the rules but you just don't have the time to do it. If you're not following the rules and your excuse is you don't have the time to do it, that's willful neglect. That also removes the caps on the fines. So if the IRS finds you in willful neglect, i.e. doing the same failed process, getting the same B notices year after year after year, the likelihood of them putting you in jail, probably not terribly likely. However, those fine maximums, they don't exist anymore. And let's not forget mandatory backup withholding. So what we're here to talk about today is an old process that we've more or less outlined, which is very manual. You're dealing with a lot of paper W-9s, and it's a very reactive process. And what we want to move to is an automated, real-time, and proactive process. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of collectively pull our heads out of the sand, and we're going to go over the 4 steps to getting correct data and ensuring that you have accurate information. Step 1, knowing what you don't know. So really what we're talking about here is identifying the name and TIN information. And there's excuse me, there's different ways you can do this. Many of you today wait for a B notice. Obviously not the ideal option. However, there's other options. There's real-time TIN match and IRS bulk TIN match, with both services that are offered by the IRS, and we're going to cover those. Real-time TIN verification is an IRS e-service that allows you to, in real time, check an individual payee against the IRS's TIN database. This is great if you're making a one-time payment, like if you're a casino or it's cash on delivery. Real-time TIN verification is also great if you are trying to correct a B notice situation and somebody's given you a W-9 and you want to verify that the information is indeed correct, or adding a new vendor into your system. Because with the real-time TIN, if you're looking at one-time payments, ultimately, the reason where this becomes important, depending on your business, is if you're a casino, you pay out a jackpot, getting that information after the fact is highly unlikely. It also helps you avoid common errors. So if you're entering in a new company you're doing business with, let's say you're doing business with Amtrak, and you put Amtrak's EIN on your 1099 form and send that to the IRS, you will get a B notice. The reason you'll get a B notice is it's not Amtrak. Amtrak's name is actually National Railroad Passenger Corporation. Or if somebody just didn't provide a name at all, or a simple typo like Jane Bonds. By using the TIN services, a lot of these costly errors can be avoided up front. So the TIN matching e-services, they have, like I said, the interactive TIN matching, which is real time, and they also have bulk. The bulk TIN matching is ideal if you're sitting at a current state where you have a lot of payees and you haven't done any TIN solicitations or services. What you do at that point is you use the bulk service to submit that entire file, and then generally within a 48-hour period, the IRS sends you a response to that with a pass-fail for those payees. You can get more information on the TIN matching services if you look at publication 2108A. They've made some updates and changes to that publication this year. One note, if you are looking at using the IRS e-services, signing up is not something that's immediate. We're going to talk about Taxport AP. You actually don't need to sign up with Taxport AP. That's part of using the service. We've taken care of that for you. But if you're doing this on your own, you require a SSN, an adjusted gross income, of an officer of the company. An officer of the company needs to be somebody who has 5% or more stakeholdership in their organization, which is usually a lynch point for signing up for these services for a lot of organizations. So now you've identified everybody who is accurate, has correct information, and people who don't have correct information. So now you need to reach out and touch someone, so to speak. And there's obviously different ways to do it. You can do it by mail, by phone call, email, in person. Now, for the purpose of what we're talking about, we have to keep one thing in mind. All these solicitation options exist to us because we're not in the B notice process. If you're in the B notice process, you can only do these solicitations via mail, which means that the person standing there in front of you still need to send them the B-Notice solicitation packet. Now, if you look at the different ways of collecting this information, a lot of this is going to depend on the type of relationships you have, as we discussed earlier. Is this something where you have a telephone customer service line, you want to set up a portal on a website, you want to do a letter self-mailer, you want to try to do it by email, in person? All these are great ways to collect the information, but the one thing we have to keep in mind is that it does take some time. So you've reached out to get these answers, but it's not going to be a one-and-done process. This is an example of an actual first B-Notice. So it's just an example of collecting correct information. People don't always respond with the information because they don't see it as a legitimate request, or they don't feel like they need to make the time to do this. And that's why it takes time to fix. Based on a 40% response rate, roughly 13,000 TINs would take about 18 months. So depending on where you sit and where your data is, probably not quite this bad. It could take you a very long time to correct this information. The other part that I also want to say is when you were getting these solicitation returns back, you're going to want to have the real-time TIN service. So if you just use the bulk TIN service to send out these packets, you have to be satisfied your requirements from a standpoint of, are you doing your best effort, from an abatement perspective, by sending out these solicitations and doing this and tracking that you've been doing this information will allow you to abate those B-Notice penalties. However, you want to be sure that you are getting accurate information so you don't have to go through that abatement process. So one great way to do that is to use the real-time TIN service when you're doing this as well. And then the last and final step is really being sure that you get that information accurate across your systems. And, depending on what type of systems you use as an organization, this can be manual keying, which if you only have a handful is definitely a fine way of doing it. You can do it through spreadsheet management, set up automated imports. I mean, there's a variety of different ways that you can approach this from a standpoint of getting the information accurate and up to date in your system. So if you take a step back and look at it, you'll see that it's really kind of a comprehensive process to being sure that you have accurate name TIN information. And it's an important process because, like we covered earlier, the focus on 1099 reporting is only becoming much more apparent. It's something that people spoke little about 5 years ago, but are definitely spending a lot of time having conversations about where is it going, what's changing, and how do you even manage this as a business with all the other things you're responsible for. So with that, you can look at it as really kind of four pieces. Depending on your organization, all these different aspects and having a really robust program may not be totally necessary, but for most organizations, having something like the upper left-hand corner where you have the real-time TIN, OFAC, and DMF checking as well. OFAC is Office of Foreign Assets Control, and DMF is Death Master File. These are also good checks to be running to be sure you're not paying people that you're not supposed to be paying, or that you're not helping somebody commit fraud ultimately. But it really depends on what's right for your organization in a lot of respects. So with that, we have really what you could consider an evolution of identity management as it relates to the 1099 process. And what you're doing is you're putting process in the front end of your business operations to ultimately remove the workload, burden, and risk to your organization around this filing process. So when you think about this process and things we covered, you really have to think about, where do you sit on this continuum? Are you on the more reactive side or the more proactive side? And what are the steps that you would reasonably want to take to be able to become a more proactive organization and reduce your organization's risk? So, like we said, a proactive process is really identifying that incorrect information, taking a more multi-pronged approach. One thing to note if you're doing the IRS e-services yourself is they do have strict phishing rules. A lot of rules and regulations around how to use the service and what you're doing is included in Publication 2108A, and a violation will lead to a 96-hour lockout. We're going to be moving into Taxport AP here real quickly, but if you use the Taxport AP solution, the bulk TIN, the real-time TIN, all that is taken care of for you. You don't need to set up an account with the IRS, and we take care of avoiding these kind of issues with the actual technology. So now we're going to move into the last part of our presentation, where I just want to highlight a few things around Taxport AP in particular and how it can help you mitigate this process and even really just manage your whole 1099 process. We're going to go through a few of the key features with the product, and if you would like more information, we'll definitely follow up with you and we can go through a demo for your organization. So what is Taxport AP? Taxport AP is really a full-service information reporting solution. We literally do everything for your organization. We do the validation checks for city, state, zip. We do the TIN validations, the OFAC, the DMF. We do the printing, the mailing, and even the transmittal to the IRS. We can handle corrections processing. You can do W-9 solicitations, B-notice processing, all from the application. And the best part about Taxport AP, which I'll show you some screens here, is it's a very, very simple process. And what that means to your organization is you don't necessarily have to worry if the person that is dedicated to 1099s is sick for the day and you need to do some processing. One, they can log in from anywhere, but two, the process is so simple and the application is so user-friendly that anybody can really pick it up and be able to use it as it walks you through each step. So one thing I want to show you here is an actual home page of Taxport AP. As you can see, it's a very clean app. But the couple parts that I want to highlight for you is, one, you can see that it's broken down into those 3 steps along the bottom of adding your data, fixing your data, and sending your data. For the purpose of today's discussion, we're not going to go through a full demonstration of how the whole application works, but it's a very easy process to follow. As you can see, there's a your recommended next steps box where it tells you what the next steps are for you within the process. It gives you very clear and concise directions throughout the entire product, really being sure that you have a successful 1099 reporting season. So, how easy is it? Is a question that we always get from people. And one of the things we wanted to highlight is actually a new feature this year, something that we're referring to as Smart Import. And for a lot of people, one of the more difficult parts of doing their 1099 processing that we've seen over the years, Convey doing this for over 25 years now, is the part that organizations struggle with most is actually getting their data into a format or a file system or an aggregator that allows them to do the 1099 reporting. And it's bringing from one system into another system that data, because all different types of applications have different types of formatting and structures and things alike. But the beautiful part about Smart Import is it actually recognizes your data. It's learning so you don't have to. So if it sees a new type of Excel file import and it hasn't seen those headers before, it gives you the opportunity to map it, but the next time you import, it does that for you. So really, every time you use the product, you're improving your user experience. And importing your data is as simple as browsing for a file as if you're importing an email or attaching a document to an email, which all of us have done before. As you can see with this example here, this is a 1099 miscellaneous import where some of the information was recognized and some of it wasn't. This is an example of the application can recognize on its own some data, take a best guess, and allow you to map. But the next time you map that data, all the information that is in that file is now mapped for you. The beauty of this is this template creation that happens automatically for you in the background is used across our entire enterprise of users, so we're all learning from each other. The other beautiful thing about Taxport AP is really going back to this TIN remediation and its best practices around managing your identity information. Whenever you import or change, Taxport AP for the payees is automatically running the validations for city-state zip, form validations, and it actually sends the payee info for bulk TIN check upon a large import. If you make a change to a payee, in the edit screen, it will rerun a real-time TIN, OFAC, and DMF check for that payee. All that's done for you. You don't have to request that of Taxport AP. Also, details for your payees are just a click away. You can see that you have your validation error checks, your TIN status, your OFAC check, your DMF, as well as you have a change log. So for those of you that are managing B-note situations, it tells you, when did I import? When did the TIN change? What was the TIN status? This way, when you're going through and you're managing maybe your B-notice process, for instance, you can actually make the determination of, is this the first B-notice or second B-notice? Also, in those situations where you're getting the responses from the individuals and you need to do a real-time TIN check, is this information accurate that they just submitted back to me? You can enter in that information and verify that payee in real time. So I hope that gives you a good brief idea of some of the tools that Taxport AP has around this particular process. Now obviously Taxport AP, being a full service 1099 solution, does a lot more around handling the printing and mailing, providing control totals, being able to export your data, being able to transmit your data, being able to handle corrections. All those things are things that are definitely part of the solution. And if you wish, we would love to be able to talk to you more about that. But the key takeaways for today that I really want everybody to take away with is the IRS is actively closing the tax gap. There's new regulations, there's increased penalties, states are following the leader. A big important component to being sure that you're ready and your organization is ready is having clean name and TIN data. That's absolutely critical. And lastly, Taxport AP convey, if Taxport AP isn't the right product for you, we have lots of products and solutions. We are a 1099 reporting organization. It's what we solely focus on. So we have a solution that's right for you. So, we're here to help as well. Also, I want to be sure everybody knows the different ways that they can stay up to date. One, we have our 1099 news blog, which is where we post a lot of really great information, a lot of really great articles, and even some pretty pictures once in a while. They really break down this whole regulatory environment and this constantly moving target and make it as simple and as understandable as far as what does it mean to you and where are things starting to look so your organization can be more informed. We're also on Twitter, and our LinkedIn group is also a great place to get tuned in to webinars like this and other educational events and webinars that we're doing to be sure that you can be as ready as possible for your organization.
Thanks, Ray. One quick question that we got here a couple times was whether or not Taxport AP contains the OFAC element.
Yes, it does. On a previous screenshot where you did the real-time TIN, you can see that the OFAC was one of the things that comes back with a pass or fail. If you click on that, what it actually does is it pulls up the actual OFAC results in a table format and gives you the ranking of all the possible payees for that individual. If you're doing a name and TIN check on a payee that is in the system, the OFAC check will be done more than just on the name and TIN, but it'll also check the against the address as well.
Thanks, Ray. Well, we want to be respectful of your time, and we have reached our 30 minutes. If you asked a question and we didn't get to you, we will make sure that someone follows up with you. I just want to let you all know that today's event has been recorded and the recorded version of this webinar and the webinar slides will be available via email to you all by early next week. For more information on Convey's solutions that can help you streamline your reporting process and stay in compliance, please visit us at www.convey.com. That concludes our webinar today, so thank you for joining us and have a great rest of the day.